Our self-worth exists simply because we do. And self-compassion is a more, I think, useful concept and something worth working on because it's not related to the ups and the downs, what's happening outside. And so intrinsic sense of self-worth that is based on self-compassion says, I am human. I am capable of making mistakes. Good things will happen in my life, but bad things will also happen. And I will be able to handle both because I'm making the effort to handle both.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Drew Ramsey podcast. It is just an absolute treat to be with you as we are thinking about mental fitness, mental health, and making sure that we are all on an active journey taking care of those aspects of our health. We have a really wonderful guest to help us with that. Another psychiatrist, one of my good friends, another wonderful person who's really keeping our conversation going, and a very special person in that. Sue Varma is with us, and Dr. Varma is really one of the top media commenters on mental health. So you're going to recognize her from the Today Show or Good Morning America. You maybe have seen her recently. She has this amazing new book out, Practical Optimism. So quickly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sue, but we're going to hop right into our interview. Her full bio is going to be up on my website. But Dr. Varma, she is a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at New York University at NYU. She's a distinguished life fellow of the American Psychiatric Association, where she's been incredibly active. She's got over 2 decades in practice as a therapist and cognitive behavioral therapist. And as you all know, I love these experts that we bring on who both are in the trenches, seeing patients every day, but also having to kind of take a step back and think about the broader conversation in mental health. So she's known nationally for all of her work. She's gotten a ton of awards. I don't want to skip over those, but I want to get to our interview. So Dr. Varma, Sue, welcome to the podcast. It's such an absolute treat to have you on.
Thank you. I always enjoy our conversations, Drew, and I'm so just grateful and honored to be here today.
Well, thanks, Sue. We've kind of grown up in this media world together, and you've always been really inspiring to me. You just have such a great sense of consistency and flair and fashion, and just a way of helping us all reflect and think about our mental health. Let's get right into it with your book, Practical
Thank
Optimism.
you.
I've been working on my optimism ever since the book came out, and I don't think I'm okay. Like with patients, I'm good. I'm a very optimistic therapist, but in my own brain, I'm worrying as I'm aging. I'm not as practically optimistic as I should be, and maybe a lot of people listening, you're also kind of resonating with that. So, can you help us just getting right into it? What is practical optimism?
Yes. So optimism is typically thought of as a disposition that you're either born with or you're not. And it's this ability to imagine the best possible outcome, to see the glass as half full, right? Like just sort of you're born with this certain outlook, predisposition to in an uncertain situation, just be like, yep, things will work themselves out. I think the best thing is going to happen here. So that's what an optimist is. A practical optimist is somebody who recognizes that there definitely is a lot of hardship in life. And pessimists often get mired in that negativity. But the interesting thing about pessimists is that they have the ability to really go deep and do the research. And maybe that's to a fault where they do so much research that they become passive. So there's something called the 3 Ps of pessimism, where you take negative things personally, you think that they're pervasive in all aspects of your life, and you think that they're permanent. And as a result, you become passive. The practical optimist marries a little bit of both. The practical optimist says, I want to be aware of hardship and danger and all the bad things that can happen. I'm going to do my research, but I'm not going to get mired in it. And so, like the optimist, they move towards action and they move towards change. But if we were to be very black and white about it, pessimists see the worst possible outcome and they don't do anything. And often on the other extreme, optimists think the best possible outcome will happen. And as a result, they too don't do anything. There's something called the ostrich effect, where you bury your head in the sand because you think things will work out. Practical optimists say, I'm going to take the information that the pessimists do, the information gathering, then I'm going to take the proactivity that the optimists have. And there's this joke that if you want details and you want accuracy, go to the pessimist. But if you want the job done, go to the optimist. And I'm going to modify that and I'm going to say, if you want the job done well, go to the practical optimist.
And this is the pessimists that they're gonna, because the critique, has, it sounds like, some accuracy, some value for us. We don't want to like throw it out.
You don't want to throw it out. And pessimism has its benefits, and pessimists are more realistic and more accurate. But are they more successful in life? No.
I'm looking. You had this great. I love this. Everybody, if you get a copy of the book, it's on page 33, and it's an exercise. It's like all these these questions. I was looking through this exercise, practical optimism in you, and it was, kind of trying to identify sources of imbalance. Like these are questions. I'm generally upbeat and positive in the morning as I anticipate my day ahead, or I feel like I'm making a contribution in my own way. Can you tell us a little bit about this self assessment and maybe how, because, I can feel very critical sometimes, and other times
Mhm.
I feel a little too optimistic. Maybe how can we get a sense of how much of this more practical stance we need?
Yes. So, when I was studying, so I started my career as the first medical director of the 9/11 mental health program, and I became interested in resilience. And one key component of resilience was optimism. But no one paid any attention to it because we were like, you're either born with it or you're not. Later on, we would learn that yes, there is a genetic component, but it's only 25%. The rest, 75% of optimism, is learned. And what do you learn? Skills, behaviors, traits, outlooks, mindset, and all of those things were teachable. So if they're teachable, then you can learn them. And what I looked at were what are the key features? What do optimists have that the rest of us can learn from? And what I came across was 8 key things that they do, 8 pillars. And I talk about that in the book. The pillars start with having a purpose in life, having an intention. It could be a purpose in life or in an activity, in a
Hang
conversation,
on,
like
I want to make sure I'm getting the mental framework. So, moving towards more practical optimism, right? Where I'm not going to be, in some ways, we call this in our field a little splitting, right? We're going to kind of, I think a lot of us do a little bit like we hover between, a little catastrophic, or I see this a lot when we procrastinate, right? We're really worried, and catastrophic, and then we finally get some activity. Or kind of in this, passive optimism that you're talking about, kind of a, what's that word, Pollyanna-ish, right? Where we're just kind of like it's got a empty, hollow. I think it's where people get like suspicious a little bit of wellness. Like, come on, like it's not gonna be all okay.
no, and it's not. And like I'm 100% with any pessimist that's like the world sucks right now. I'm like I'm with you. Like we can make the list. War, climate change, inflation. So recognizing that all of these things exist, and still at the end of the day, we have to embrace a outlook of optimism. Why? Because we have no choice. And that's something I learned from my patients who have seen the darkest of days, and they tell me, Dr. Varma, at some point, what is the cost and benefit of thinking this way, right? And that's something that I learned of there is no utility at a certain point of holding on to that negativity. And so that assessment that you're looking at maps to my 8 pillars, and I don't tell you that because I want you to do it without knowing what you're getting into, just sort of being very open. And each there's 40 questions, and each 5 questions pertain to one of the 8 pillars. So do you wake up with feeling excited or looking forward to the day? And I get that if you're depressed, you're not going to feel a sense of purpose in life. So there can be overlap between pessimism and depression. And in fact, pessimism, negative thinking, rumination is a slippery slope to depression. And if somebody who's been treated for depression, it's almost like a harbinger, if that's the right word, or a foreshadowing of depression onset, like the pessimistic negative thinking.
Yeah, I think we all kind of notice that a little bit when you see you're a little more irritable, or you're kind of seeing the more negative aspect, or we talk about a negative bias that happens in
Yes.
depression, where the glass is definitely half empty, and the water is a little bit muddy,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely, totally. So I get it. Like there are going to be people who those first 4 or 5 questions that have to do with purpose, they may feel like I don't feel motivated. No, I don't feel energized, and it could be depression, but it could also be burnout. It could be languishing, where we're not our best, not feeling our best, but maybe stagnant or empty or bored. So there's a variety of reasons why a person may say, I can't connect to my purpose. But it's not just any one of those things. There's sort of these 8 pillars where
yeah,
it's are you
let's hear about all eight. Can you just? I know it's a lot, but I wanted to maybe just hit pause, we take a breath, and let's try and
Yes.
download, what these 8 pillars are and see what tips Dr. Varma has for us to be working on them in the coming days.
Yes. And Drew, just to back up for a second, there's benefit in this, right? Because somebody may be like, all right, you're giving me a lot of work, but what am I getting out of this? And so maybe we could just start there to be like, there's a lot of benefits to optimism, to practicing optimism if you're not born with it. And I have to say, I'm not sure I was born with it, right? And so that's why I feel like I can talk about this because I'm like, I'm with you. If you're catastrophizing, if you're assuming the worst case, or maybe you're feeling anxious, I can relate. And so this is a practice that I too have to practice every day. It does not necessarily come naturally to me.
Well, I actually, and everybody I've hung out with Sue at conferences and stuff, and it actually is true. You are a optimistic and a positive presence. I would say, all of the times that I've hung out with you, I know it's in a professional and somewhat personal setting, but it is true. You practice what you preach.
Thank you. So, starting with purpose, it's having intention. And people who have a purpose in life, like a lot of that purpose has to do with giving back. And I feel lucky that you and I, we are blessed that our day-to-day work involves giving back to other people. Of course, we're nourished by it as well. But a lot of people have jobs where they don't feel like that impact is built in. Are my contributions really mattering to other people? Am I really helping people, or am I putting more money in the company's pocket? That's something that I'm sure that, a lot of us hear. And so the key is that your purpose does not have to come from your paycheck, right? You can find meaning and joy and pleasure and giving back, volunteering in whatever form, right? It could be like the once a month, PTO activity that you do. We just had field day at my kid's school, like the parents who are busy and working and in finance or in legal careers, and they don't always feel like I'm doing impactful work like that is directly visible and helping people. So volunteering 2 hours a week, studies show that gives you a longer life. Exercise. If you're feeling lost, one episode of exercise can boost your sense of purpose. Go for a walk. You will come back feeling productive. You've done something good for the day.
I'm so in the middle of this. Everybody listening knows this is true. I've been fascinated. I mean, there's a little like 2 mile run that our family goes on. I've been getting encouraged to go on this for a long time. And something happened. Actually, I think it's related to a patient I spoke to who's a real incredible athlete who's really struggling. And there's something about speaking with her. I don't know. Something happened though, a behavioral change where I'm thinking I've gone out on a few runs. And this is so apparent to me as it is to everyone listening. Right? You go. I mean, the first one, it was awful. My lungs felt like the spasm. My back went out. But even with that, I mean, later in the day, I was like wow. So it just you felt it, and but the mood, everything you're talking about, we all know it. So, since we all know it, what is it that you have for us in terms of how do we get a little bit, maybe more of it, especially for those of us who like, I know exercise, I know my 90 minutes every blah, blah. Well, I guess 150 minutes a week is what the recommendation is for depression. What tips do you have for us? How do we get more of it?
So, so that's another pillar is practicing healthy habits, and optimists take care of themselves, right? Because they see the value. Optimists live 20% longer, and it's no surprise. They have exceptional longevity, which is living well and into your 80s. So one is knowledge and information, right? So sometimes just being like, there's so much science, it's undeniable. It's not just like, oh yeah, like I remember those food nutrition triangles when we were a kid, and I'm like, what does this even mean? Like, why? Like, I'm a kid, like I don't know what this means, right? But as we get older, we know that whether it's relationships midlife, whether it's weight training midlife, and because you are midlife, you can be like, oh, I don't want to end up like that 80-year-old parent or 90-year-old parent who's immobile and hip fractures and drinking too much or whatever it is that's happening to a lot of our parents. We're in the sandwich generation. So we can have the benefit of not feeling immortal, but still having like a long runway where we can make changes right now. So I feel like knowledge is empowering because I'm someone who's like, if you don't give me the science, I don't see the data, you're not going to get my buy-in, right? So
So
that's
when
one
we
thing.
wake up, maybe we're not feeling like moving. One of your recommendations is we just remember this conversation. Look, the science is undeniable. Like, unlike a lot of things in life where, you know, maybe not. And I was talking to some people this week about things they're thinking about starting, and they're like, it's a lot of effort. I'm not sure what it's going to deliver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exercise, you're saying, hey, 100%, the science is in,
100%.
it's going
Yes.
to help you be more optimistic.
Yes. And you have to plan for it and you have to lower the entry barrier. So I'll give you an
Mm,
example. I'm not particularly a morning person. So if you said to me, Sue, okay, you have a fitness goal, we're going to work together. Like we're friends, we're colleagues. I'm going to meet you if we were living in the same town. Let's do a 5 a.m. hot yoga class. I don't like the heat and I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. I'd have to probably get up at 4 a.m. to meet you at 5 a.m., right? So that's not going to happen. And I would say start with lowering the entry barrier, low hanging fruit. What is the most accessible thing for you? When are you most likely to do it? When is it most fun? When is it most convenient to you? Let's start there. If the
mm.
most accessible, convenient, and fun thing to do is play basketball with a friend at 6:30 in the evening, or going for a walk, a 2 mile run with your family at 7 a.m., or whatever it is. So, what is available to you at this moment? Because a lot of times we have all these entry barriers, these hurdles. I got to get a gym membership, but the gym membership is expensive, or I have to get in my car and drive 45 minutes, or I have to go after work and that's too late. So, there's going to be 100 reasons why you can't do it, and you have to anticipate all those obstacles and plan in advance. It's not magically going to happen, right? It has to be planned in your calendar as if your life depended on it, because it absolutely does. And so the question is not why, the question is how. How are you going to figure this out? And I'm saying anyone that's listening to this, and if you're already a fitness guru, great, good for you. Keep doing it. And if you're not, then the thought is looking at your calendar after you finish listening to this podcast, or even maybe hit pause, take your calendar out and look at the next 7 days and say, where am I scheduling my snacking, exercise snacking? I also like social snacking, and we'll get into that, but 15-minute increments. And last night, for example, I want to tell you, went to a very interesting event, and Melissa Etheridge was there, and I loved her music. I don't know if you were a fan growing up,
Fan.
and the event was like, on Spring Street, and I was like, oh, how do I get to the train? And it was like 2 miles away, but I was with a friend, and it was not too dark, and it was a pleasant evening. So instead of taking an Uber or a cab, I was like, you know what? I'm walking the 2 miles with a friend, and I'm tired. It's the end of my day. I've been doing TV stuff all day long, and I was so glad that I did it because I didn't have time to go to the gym yesterday, but I felt as if I did something. And walking, as we all know, has a million benefits and is so underrated. I remember getting shamed, Drew, in residency by a patient of mine who, was very much a fitness person, but almost bordering to something else, the eating disorder or body image disorder character, category. But I remember saying something about, well, if you don't have time, could you walk? And I remember her laughing at me, and she's like, well, maybe you think that that counts as fitness. And the irony is that 20 years later, all I'm seeing in the New York Times and everywhere else is the benefits of walking. So low hanging fruit, keep it simple, plan in advance. And if you don't have time to go to the gym, be spontaneous and say, is it going to be the stairs, instead of the elevator? Where am I fitting stuff in?
Yeah, and I like the notion you're talking about where it becomes habituated. I remember this in the hospital when I was in training. I just loved taking the stairs because one, they're like give you a little moment of almost privacy. You're just, when you're in a hospital, you're part of a team. You're always with patients and at the nurse's station, and the stairwell was kind of peaceful. But also, you got those steps in, literally,
Yes.
and it just added up over time. So it sounds like we've got a few of these pillars, and I want to. You've got a lot of great skills, and so I want to get into that. But I want to get through just hearing just a little bit, and everyone's going to have to buy the book. Where there's just great, like there's a whole chapter on pride, and I really am loving this chapter because, like pride, I'm going to say pride and self-esteem are such a hard topic for us, right? Where we don't want to be prideful, we want to have humility, but at the same time, we want to be proud of things we do, and we want to, have a sense of self and really engage in that in a way that accomplishes things for ourselves and others. So, walk us through the pillars we haven't hit, and then let's get to some skills.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for reading, Drew, because I so respect and admire the work that you do. And your hope always is obviously you want to reach everyone, but like when your colleagues and people that you trust and respect are reading your book, it's even more meaningful. So thank you.
Oh, Sue, it's such a treat. There's a handful of us. I think everybody's kind of, or I hope folks listening, a little group of us in mental health and psychiatry who have been supporting each other, whether it's you or Greg Scott Brown or Jesse Gold, or Jack Turbin's book that just came out, kind of our group in some ways. Anybody who wants to join, come on. But of psychiatrists who care about the public perception of mental health and psychiatry and understood that for all of the great research being done, a lot of people out there in the public just aren't hearing about the I call it the new mental health, where
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
we're not sitting around just debating Prozac. Right? We are thinking
Right.
about a lot of skills and tools and research and new mechanisms. But thanks for that, Sue. It's a lot of fun being your colleague, and it's a really treat to have this conversation. And I know we're going to have a lot more. I was remiss missing the APA annual meeting this year. A part of getting to see our group, and there's just something encouraging about all of us that it's a lot of fun. But let's get back to these practical optimism pillars.
Yeah. So pride, it's very interesting. Like self-esteem. Somebody I was talking to in an interview was like, "Sue, I'm fascinated to hear you say this because the last 20 years, all we're hearing about is boosting our kids' self-esteem." And I find this to be a rather flawed concept because self-esteem is very much dependent on accolades and achievements and what's happening in your life. So if you're doing well, if you win at a sports game, you're like, yay, like the kid, the young person is like, my self-esteem is high. And if you fail or don't get a job promotion or fail a test or whatever it is, or just don't do as well, or when we're comparing ourselves to other people and we're not hitting all the milestones as quickly as other people are, our self-esteem can take a hit. And this chapter, Pride, is about healthy, intrinsic sense of self-worth that exists simply because we do. Our self-worth exists simply because we do. And self-compassion is a more, I think, useful concept and something worth working on because it's not related to the ups and the downs, what's happening outside. It's kind of like how weather can change from day to day, but climate is usually like what's the state of the weather over a long period of time. And so self-worth, intrinsic sense of self-worth that is based on self-compassion says, I am human. I am capable of making mistakes. Good things will happen in my life, but bad things will also happen. And I will be able to handle both because I'm making the effort to handle both. And this self-compassion, a lot of research is based on the work of Kristen Neff, where you're observing what you're experiencing. So like I berate myself. I am so hard on myself. I think I'm the harshest critic. And so for me, I really have to work on this because it does not come easy to me. I'll be like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you accomplish, these 15 things today? And instead to be like, okay, well, what about the 5 things you did do? They were big. You checked them off. And my tendency, this is where the half full, the glass half full, at least for myself, I'm so much more compassionate to everyone else in the world. I'll be like, I totally get where you're coming from with my patients, with my family, with my friends. It's only that I do this to myself. We self-flagellate. So I think a lot of women do. So I talk about how to boost your self-compassion, not necessarily your self-esteem, because you don't have control over things happening outside with the good and the bad sometimes.
Tell us that's different. I mean, self-compassion is like a love of myself, even if I'm not, I don't know, winning or doing well, or maybe, not putting in my best effort or accomplishing things in a way I feel I should be. I still, you said, you made it sound like I have worth just, I don't know, just because I'm here.
Yes, yes, just because you exist. And I think that that's hard. And for a lot of people, because Western mentality, the United States is always focused on go, 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 right? And I love that. I love that we have so much opportunity, right? Like in so many parts of the world, hard work doesn't. And I get that there's systemic biases and not everything is equal for all people. There's discrimination, like all of that. I've been on both sides of this. So I get that just because you work hard doesn't mean good things will happen for you. But there's opportunities available, right? Even when there's conflict and challenges.
Well, I think you're just a wonderful example of that. Just your work and some of that self criticism you're speaking about has also driven you to great things. I mean, I think you are uh, one of the top 5, if not the absolute top media personality when it comes to national news around mental health. And so, you've really transcended the biases that certainly exist, and done that with a lot of aplomb and grace, right? That you've really focused on the positive, and it's clearly had an impact.
Thank you. And it's because I practice this, it's like, and so I want to give hope to people to say, if it doesn't come naturally to you, it's totally fine. It's workable. It's doable, right? So use the self-criticism to a degree, use the worry to fuel you, like, oh my God, what's going to happen if I don't do this? But also, I think, what's true, what's so interesting is so many people are afraid to let go of the self criticism, the self flagellation, the anxiety that they think that lights a fire under them. Because they're like, what would I be without it? Right? How would I be driven? How would I be motivated? And also, a lot of times people think like being too self compassionate is making you weak. Right? Oh, are you just going to let the person off the hook? Like, oh, I have to be so nice to myself. Like, I don't do anything. And like, yet I should still love myself. Right? I'm not saying become a sociopath, right? I'm not saying don't take responsibility for your actions. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because so many people equate self-compassion with like woo-woo soft thinking. And the research shows that people who are self-compassionate um, actually do better. So they did tests, like a math test. Students failed it. They did a 10-minute intervention, and they ended up, without even having to study more, just forgiving themselves, they did better on the test. Parents who are caregivers of children with special needs, really stressed out, self-compassion exercise, they're able to handle and manage their life much better.
So is there a statement that you say to yourself, or is a couple of mantras, or a way that if we want to increase our self compassion in the coming weeks, that the research says and your experience says, these phrases help?
Yes. So saying like, I'm not alone in my hardship. I am human. I am not the first person to have made this mistake. This too shall pass. There is a way out. I will try better next time. I am capable. I'm capable of doing more. And at the same time, I accept where I am right now. So that acceptance is a big piece. There's this idea of what's called common humanity, of like, I'm not the only one who's messed up. And it's so hard, Drew, because I feel like when we're used to feeling or wanting to feel impactful, right? If we screwed up, I mean, I know like the cost is higher. Like if you're a doctor, you have someone else's well-being in your hands. So the stakes feel even that much more. But in my personal life, right? Like if I'm juggling 20 things and, even last night I find myself coming home late, but I have to do stuff for my kids. Like it just never ends. And they're all good things and I'm not complaining, but I'm not going to be able to have output the way I want. And I feel like we live in a also critical and judgmental society where we expect people, well, you should have your act together. So the idea of slipping up, oh my God, this perfectionistic tendency of maintaining appearances, especially when people expect a lot from you, it can be really hard on one's sense of self worth.
Well, I love this idea of focusing on our capacity, that it's and not tying that always to outcome. I think that's something all of us really do, right? That whether I'm capable or not revolves around what I achieve. And so it reminds me, I had this wonderful moment. I've been, I wouldn't say struggling, but trying to understand and kind of meditate on and be more active on kind of my connections outside of the treatment room. I find after being a therapist for so long, there's something about the intensity and currency of the therapeutic conversation that almost like doesn't translate into the home or into friendships in a certain way. Anyway, my son and I are walking off to take a walk because walks are great, right? Because you end up talking about stuff. If we are walking by a woman, she asked me something about, we said, good day. And I said something about what I was getting done. And she said, remember, it's human being, not human doing. And it really reminds me of what you're talking about, which is this notion that when we just think self-compassion is just allowing us to be, that there's no pressure, there's no criticism, there's no assessment, it does make all of us a little uncomfortable. And at the same time, being in terms of that being a state of compassion about our capacity, and that we don't have to be using it all the time to prove that we
Yes,
have it.
yes.
It's just a wonderful idea for all of us to carry forward and be sitting with, that when we're resting, when we're thinking of our capacity, that when we're just being with ourselves and others, it doesn't in any way mean that we're not uh, moving things forward for ourselves.
And also do like looking back at where some of those narratives or scripts or messages came from. I think it's really important. The conditioning that made us feel as if we constantly had to be doing something, like I think back to summers growing up, and my parents always felt like there was this saying that the idle mind is a devil's workshop, and that work is worship. Like these were these. Like, it's funny. I grew up in an South Asian family, but they might as well have been like puritanical, like work beliefs of like you must work, work all the time, and being like productive and useful is good. And so this message of like, I must always be on and working to prove my worth in a way, to earn my keep, so to speak. And being aware of where did this come from? And then kind of undoing that to some extent takes time and effort.
Usually we go back, we kind of get into our parents and our development in a certain way. And sometimes that makes us closer, sometimes not. You and your dad are both psychiatrists. And so you both have this developmental environment you're growing up in where it sounds like you're getting pushed. Sounds like there's in some ways some expectations, but you and your dad are like super sweet. I've seen you guys together. It's like I have a daughter. I have told my daughter about you too, and wondered is she going to come to the conference with me someday. And can you share a little bit? We're all of us are kids or parents, who's listening? Can you share a little bit about what has helped you and your dad, kind of transcend the challenges of being a parent and having to challenge your kids, and maintain such closeness?
Great question. And I also think about this as a parent with my kids of like, I, w- I want to help inspire and motivate them, but at the same time, I don't want to drive them so hard that that they miss out on their childhood in a way. But I think what helped my dad and I have a friendship is common interests, and he loves to read, and we're always sharing books. And from a very young age, I remember reading like Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck, and sharing with him, or then later on, I got interested in philosophy and reading John Kabat-Zinn and sharing it with both of my parents, and they got really into it. So I feel like books were a big thing, and travel. My dad loves to travel, and we would travel all around the world. And
How does that happen? Do one of you propose a trip, or is it just kind of you're in the habit, or you see something cool and you say, like, I want to check this out with you, Dad? Greta, I hope you're listening right now.
I mean, my it's so funny, Drew. My dad is like 86, 87. He's always like, just in the last 5 years, we went to Dubai with him. We went to Vienna. We did 1,000-mile road trip with my kids, my husband, my dad. My mom has passed. We did 1,000-mile road trip across Europe. We went to the Maldives, went to India. We literally went to Barbados. We're planning another trip to Colombia. Like, so it's a combination. When I was younger, he was the one driving. Drew, I'm going to share something very interesting, which not a lot of people know. So my dad told me at a young age, he's like, I will give you education, but it won't be in the traditional way. And I was like, I don't know what the hell he means. Like, what is this mysterious thing? So my dad later on, when I got to college, was like, yeah, you're kind of on your own. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, you're going to have to, figure it out. Loans, scholarship, working full time. And I worked like 16-year-old. I had 3, 4 jobs. I was in college, pre-med, and it was really hard. And I remember when I went to my med school interview, the person interviewing me was a psychiatrist, and he was like, how are you not, and I had talked about it on my application, he's like, how are you not resentful of your dad? Like, your dad's a psychiatrist. He might have had some means or ability to help you pay for college and med school, like as you're getting into med school. Like, how are you not? And it was funny, my response to him as like a 20-year-old was literally this: I'm going to make lemonade out of lemons. And so how funny is it now that that's on the cover of my book, right? Like, and there's an umbrella in there to show the festivity. And so I could have held it against my dad, or felt like, well, you're driving me, but you're not
Was
helping
there a
me.
little lemon part? I mean, you're like a freshman, you're looking at like the, debt coming in. Dad's like, well-paid psychiatrist somewhere, let's say. Was there a lemons period where you're like, or were you really from the beginning kind of seeing this more as an opportunity or as a lesson or as this mysterious thing your dad was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I knew his heart was in the right place because I don't think he was doing it like, and he compensated for it in the travel because that was how he gave us education. He's like, you know, not paying for college, but we're going to Europe this summer and we're going to go around and learn all about the culture in Spain and these remote towns and villages. So I thought it was a little odd, but I was like, hey, I'm going to go with it because he loves to travel, and that's how he wanted to share the world with me in his
It's
own
such an
way.
interesting strategy for every parent who's listening, right? You all know we've got our whatever your college savings account going is, whatever, however you're dealing with the anxiety of seeing that, every year is going to cost like a gazillion dollars, and they might need to take your family dog too if they want. I mean, it's really, it feels overwhelming at times, and this model is really interesting. This idea of like, hey,
And yeah, I
education
knew
is
those
very
things.
valuable. We value, but you need it. It's very
Yeah.
expensive. We want to not help you with that in the traditional way. Instead, we're going to take you around the world and we're going
And
to
those
show you about the
experiences.
world. We're going to read
Yeah,
books with
yeah,
you. And in some
yes.
ways, it's
And
an interesting model because it inspires you to keep learning, it feels like it's a model of success without saying, hey, the point of my success was to give you the fruits of success and pay for school, graduate school, etc.
it's interesting. Like, I don't. There definitely was, challenge. But I have to say, Drew, like looking back, my first job was when I was 11. I taught Hindi with my mom, so she had a job working for the Board of Ed. They had started schools in India, came to the United States, got her PhD. So I had both parents very interested in education. My mom was constantly, she had like four to five master's degrees, four bachelors. So always educating herself, always learning, and gave me a job at a very early age. And I have to say, I've always worked since the age of 11. And I know that's not something that's happening in like, I'm seeing a lot of parents saying, listen, you should focus your time on school and sports, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not really encouraging jobs because there's no time. There's so much competition to get into college. But there's something to be said about earning your own money from a young age, having to think about how do you prioritize, how do you budget, and also this sense of agency that I got of I'm capable. Like, I have to say, so much of the public speaking work that I do, the confidence that I developed, were from being in experiences with my parents, going with them to meetings, um, and learning. My mom had taken me under her wing, and as she was teaching and writing plays, and I was on stage as a young kid. So I didn't have a traditional upbringing in a lot of ways, like, but it's made me who I am, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, I love this notion of also learning through work and valuing the work experience. I feel this sometimes as a parent where now living in a smaller community where, I don't know, my kids could go and host at a restaurant or wait tables or, uh, uh, it, or mow lawns, what they're doing more of this summer. And, and it's hard not to sometimes have that, I would say, modern privileged parenting stance of, wait, shouldn't you be working on your sports skills or your chess game or, learning something? And
Yes,
I really think it's important for us to see this cultural shift,
yes,
as people and as
yes,
parents, and remember just this incredible value you're talking about. I love how you put it in our schedule: 2 hours a week, folks. Are we volunteering 2 hours a week? It's an incredible challenge, right? Along with all of the exercise and all of the busy stuff we all have in our lives. If you think about what builds community, what builds a sense of self-esteem and really enhances self-compassion, something like volunteering, one of the tips you gave earlier, is just such a great one. And it feels like another way of thinking about quote unquote work, and what our effort can give us in terms of our mental health and mental fitness.
absolutely.
I want to hear about your work as a mother, and I think the reason is because well, a lot of the reasons behind that, but one, it's not something that we get to hear about much from you, uh, and I wanted to hear a little bit about your thoughts on modern motherhood, especially with two sons, and especially I've got there's a new book. Ruth Whitman has a book of Boy Mom that just came out, all about the challenges of raising boys today. And so I guess my short question is, Sue, can you tell us a little bit about raising boys and being a mom in the modern world, especially as you think about mental health and modern masculinity?
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you so much for asking me that. So, and yeah, I never get to talk about it. I love being a mom, and I think it's like one of the most beautiful things and a blessing. And it's not always easy. And I think I lead with authenticity and vulnerability. And what I mean by that is I have expectations of them, but I also want them to always feel comfortable talking to me. And that starts with saying like, I want to know how you're feeling and encouraging them to tap into feelings. And with one of my sons, he doesn't talk about feelings as much as the younger one, who's more, I think, emotive, expressive, articulate, and they're both bright, but one gets feelings and I think easier than the other. But I think it's because the older one is also hitting that preteen age of where like I'm too cool to talk to my mom. And so I love what you said about going for a walk. And what I'm finding is my older son is now really into the show Suits. And so that's how I bond with him is I have to sit and it's a great show. I mean, I just started watching it, but that is how we bond is then he'll ask me questions about like, how the law works. And so figuring out, meeting them where they're at, what their interests are. The other thing is taking them into my world. And I've slowly been doing that a little bit more. When they were younger, I was always hesitant, like if they were to come on a live TV show, are they going to be standing there talking, tripping over the wires, arguing with each other because they're close in age? And recently with the book launch, even though it wasn't always convenient, I had them come with me to a few of my bigger events. And there was one I did with the Surgeon General recently, and they got to meet and interact with him, and also with my book launch. And it was really cute because it was at a bookstore, and we had like I don't know 150 people. And afterwards, it was being professionally taped. They went up to my kids. They were going up to everyone, and they're like, "How did you feel listening to the talk?" And it was really cute. Both of them were like, "We felt so honored that she's our mom." And it was really such a sweet moment to be like, okay, I'm doing something right. And it was cute. Like in different contexts, they've said things like that. Like when we grow up, either we want to be with somebody like my mom or we want to be like her. So, my husband is also a great role model. And the joke is like we have division of labor. He's like their athletic director. And so they're winning all sorts of stuff, medals and sports. And then I joke academic director. So I'm doing the reading of the books and the travels. And we do that together. But I feel grateful because they do have a dad that's also very in touch with his feelings and is also very calm and patient and humble as a person and playful and sweet. And so I think that we both I'm quick to apologize to my kids if I did something wrong. I'm quick to say I don't know all the answers. Let's figure this out together. But I also can be firm when needed, gentle and firm.
I'm curious about some of the, dad tips you're seeing in your husband. Those are some great attributes from sweet to playful. And I'm wondering if either a structure, a framework, or a mindset that you see him have as a dad that you could share.
They go on a lot of like boys ski trips together, and I love that because I know you're an expert. I don't know how to ski, and so I'll go with them. But then after a while, with my book launch, they went to Whistler this year, and they developed so many like internal jokes and funny things, and like kind of bonded as friends in a way. So I feel like that alone time, that one on one, they have a different relationship with each one of us. I feel like they
Yeah,
can
I love
talk.
that idea of just the intention, the father-son trip or
Yeah.
father-daughter trip of creating some special and isolated time. I think, as you're noting, there's so much in modern parenthood around creating, the structure and the opportunities for our children that sometimes I think in parenting you get so busy you can miss that dedicated time to really or activity that I think all of us who are a little anti-screen, it's like the idea that like you're sitting and watching TV. I do that too, but you spend time and engage where you can, and I think
Yes,
just
and to nurture those relationships into adulthood. When we were all at the APA in San Francisco a few years ago, after that trip, my dad and I went to Napa Valley. We drove. We then we went to Mountainside, the Google campus. We visited a friend there who took us around. And then we went to Vancouver Island. We met a bunch of family and friends. He had a friend from medical school from 50 years ago that he hadn't seen, but they had stayed in touch from like pen pals or on phone. So even as an adult, spending that time with him, hiking, biking, like we did a lot of outdoors, great stuff. So he keeps me active. So to your question, who initiates the trips? It's both of us, but he's a big part of it. So I feel like he really is the ultimate optimist and practical optimist, my dad. And like he inspired a lot of this book and his story. I start out talking about him growing up in India, but really the model of it, what exceptional longevity looks like, to be so healthy, to be vibrant, to prioritize relationships. He's constantly with friends and family traveling all over. So I feel like he embodies very much what healthy aging looks like. And for me is a model of that, and maintains a great relationship with my kids and spends a lot of time with them and teaches them Hindi and math, and they play chess together and read. So that love of people, of culture, of learning, of curiosity, I think we all share that with each other and try to grow together.
Oh, it's such a wonderful family legacy for you all too. Ranging
Thank
from the
you.
way that I'm sure your husband and your dad must have a real sense of accomplishment as men in terms of staying connected and raising boys who stay connected, and then that just measure of health we have as we age. We're all so aware, especially for men, but for all of us, how we maintain and keep our social connections, how we stay in a mindset of optimism, really depends on the people around us and depends on a level of activity that we really have to attend to like never before. It's really, as we think about this mental fitness framework we've been talking about on this podcast, so much of what Sue is talking about, and I think one of the reasons I love talking about your family is seeing how a family system has embraced that. And as we think about what, so many people don't have this, are kind of hoping for, right? This notion of having a multi generational experience, this transfer of wisdom and knowledge from your dad to your boys. It's a really wonderful thing to share. And I appreciate you also giving us some really concrete tools in your book, just to hold it up again, this wonderful book, Practical Optimism, full of tips and full of just, really, like I said, deep chapters about things like pride, a deep knowing of your self-worth. Really worth you sitting down with this notion wherever you are, wherever this podcast is finding you. I always imagine you all are out there driving in your cars in your commute on the way home, or sitting on a weekend. But sitting and having an appropriate sense of pride about your self worth, something that Dr. Varma is encouraging us to do, along with our 2 hours of volunteer time and exercising. Dr. Varma, I know you're busy with patients. We didn't get into CBT. We didn't get into race and culture. We didn't get into so many things that you have great wisdom on. So we'll have to have you back. But tell everybody how they can find you. What's the best way to engage and interact with you? What's coming up? And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I would love to stay in touch with everybody. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Sue Varma, the word doctor spelled out, Doctor, Sue, Sue, Varma. And so I'm most active on Instagram, though I'm on other platforms as well. And Practical Optimism is coming out in 10 languages. So if you're speaking Spanish or Portuguese or Korean, Turkish, Hungarian, Slavic, I mean, there's just so many. I'm just so grateful. And so I'm going to be doing talks in different parts of the world in the next year or so, and also locally. So stay connected with me on Instagram. That's where I'm most common. I do have a website, Dr. Sue Varma, but I'm not as updating it as much as my Instagram, which is just easier for me. And that's how I love to stay connected. I learn so much. I keep in touch with what you're doing, Dr. Drew. So thank you. And I hope that people get the book. I narrated the audio version. So, if you're in
So
the
much
car,
fun, right? I love that narrating the audio version. It was, it felt like a way of being with the book that was very, I don't know, I'd never experienced anything like that, reading the audio
yeah,
book. Well, Sue, thanks. I can't wait to hang out again and catch up and compare notes. It's so wonderful seeing all of your success, and everyone. Thanks so much for your time. As always, my request of you is quite simple. Thanks for spending time with us, and I hope you use this, whatever stuck with you, whatever idea, whether it's looking at volunteer opportunities or thinking about how to connect up in positive ways or active ways with your family, like Dr. Varma is such a great example of. above, or some of the other tips and tools we talked about. I hope you can make those of use and integrate those into your life in the coming days to keep working on your mental fitness and keep improving your mental health. Everybody, until our next episode, I will see you then. Send good vibes your way. Please share these and comment and let us know how we can make them better for you. Dr. Sue, have a great one. The world is round, and I look forward to when our paths cross again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.